Nira once believed that love was the safest place a woman could rest her heart. She believed that when you found your person, the world would become softer around you. For her, that person was Aaron. He was not loud or flashy, but he was steady. The kind of man who listened before he spoke, who held her hand when she was afraid, who dreamed quietly but worked fiercely. They built their small life together in the city, step by step, from a one-room apartment to a modest home, from borrowed furniture to things they bought with their own sweat. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Your support helps these real-life inspired love stories reach hearts that are quietly breaking in silence. On the morning Aaron died, the house felt too big for Nira's grief. The walls echoed with memories. His cup was still on the kitchen counter. His jacket hung behind the door. The last words he said to her replayed in her mind like a cruel loop. "I'll be back before nightfall," he had said, smiling as he tied his shoes. "Don't forget your lunch," Nira replied. He laughed. "You worry too much." That was the last time she heard his voice alive. The accident was sudden. A careless driver. A phone call she would never forget. By the time she reached the hospital, Aaron was already gone. The room smelled of disinfectant and finality. She touched his cold hand and whispered his name until her voice broke. The world did not stop for her pain. The nurses moved on. The hallway buzzed with other lives continuing. But for Nira, time ended in that moment. The days after the burial blurred into one long night. She sat alone in the house they had filled with laughter. Neighbors came with food she did not eat. Friends came with words she did not hear. When the house finally grew quiet again, the silence pressed on her chest until breathing felt like work. Then his family arrived. Aaron's older brother, Vane, walked in with a face that looked like sympathy but carried something colder underneath. With him came their aunt, Mara, and two distant relatives who barely spoke to Nira before Aaron's death. They sat in her living room like guests who had overstayed their welcome. "We're here to help you sort things out," Vane said, clearing his throat. "Sort what out?" Nira asked softly. "Aaron's assets. The house. The business account. The car," Mara added, her eyes scanning the room as if measuring its worth. Nira blinked. "Aaron and I built this together." Vane's lips tightened. "You're still young. You can start again. But this family property belongs to blood." Her heart thudded painfully. "What are you saying?" "We'll handle the legal side," Mara said, already standing. "It's better for everyone." The papers came faster than her grief could process. Lawyers spoke in language she did not understand. Forms were pushed in front of her. She was told she would be compensated fairly. But fair did not feel fair when the keys to her own home were taken from her hands. Fair did not feel fair when she was told to pack her things and leave the life she had built with her husband. One evening, as she folded Aaron's clothes into a small suitcase, Vane stood at the door. "You should be grateful," he said. "We're not leaving you with nothing." Nira looked up at him, her eyes red but dry. "You took my husband. Now you're taking my home." He scoffed. "We didn't take your husband. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." When she finally walked out of that house, she did not cry. The tears had dried into something harder. Something quiet and dangerous. She stood on the sidewalk with her suitcase, the door closing behind her like the end of a chapter she never wanted to finish. She went back to her mother's small apartment on the edge of the city. The room was cramped, the ceiling low, the nights noisy. But it was shelter. Some nights, she lay awake staring at the ceiling, hearing Aaron's laughter in her memory. "I don't know how to live without you," she whispered into the dark. In her dreams, he answered. But in the morning, she woke alone. Months passed. The world slowly demanded that she move. Bills came. Life knocked. One afternoon, she met a woman named Sarah at a small community center where Nira had gone looking for work. "You're quiet," Sarah said, studying her. "But your eyes are awake. What happened to you?" Nira hesitated, then said, "I lost everything." Sarah nodded. "That can either break you or teach you how to rebuild." Sarah ran a small logistics firm. Nothing big. But she needed help. Nira started as an assistant, organizing files, answering calls, learning the business from the ground up. She worked late. She asked questions. She listened more than she spoke. At night, she read about contracts, investments, property laws. Knowledge became her new shelter. One evening, after they closed the office, Sarah handed her a cup of tea. "You're different now," Sarah said. "Different how?" "You carry pain like a weapon. But you also carry focus. That combination can change your life." Nira looked down at the steam rising from the cup. I don't want revenge. Sarah smiled gently. You don't need revenge. You need power over your own story. Slowly, Nira found her strength returning. She learned to speak in meetings. She learned to negotiate. She learned to say no. Her voice grew steadier. Her back straighter. The woman who once asked for permission to exist was becoming someone who wrote her own rules. But in quiet moments, her heart still broke for Aaron. She kept his watch in her bag. Sometimes, when the world felt too heavy, she held it in her palm. I'm still here, she whispered. I hope you're proud of me. One night, after a long day, she stood by the window of her small room and watched the city lights flicker. In the reflection, she barely recognized herself. The softness was still there. The love was still there. But now, beneath it, there was steel. And somewhere deep inside her, a promise began to form. They had taken everything from her when her husband died. But they had not taken her will. And one day, when she returned, it would not be as the broken widow they dismissed. It would be as the woman they never saw coming. Nira did not plan to return to that side of the city. She told herself she had no reason to. The old streets held too many shadows. Too many corners where she could almost see Aaron walking beside her, laughing at something small, squeezing her hand like he was reminding her she wasn't alone. But life had a way of pulling her back to the places she swore she'd left behind. It started with a contract. Sarah's company had grown, slowly, then suddenly. A new client wanted a full logistics partnership for a chain of modern retail outlets. The deal was big enough to change everything, and the final meeting was being held in a sleek office tower downtown. Nira sat beside Sarah in the conference room, calm on the outside while her heart tapped a nervous rhythm inside her ribs. Sarah leaned close and whispered, "You're ready, right?" Nira nodded. "I'm ready." The door opened. People filed in. Suits, briefcases, the soft scent of expensive cologne. And then she saw him. A man stepped in last, tall and well-built, with a face that looked like it had known both laughter and loss. His hair was cut neat, his jaw clean, his eyes sharp in a quiet way. He carried himself like someone who didn't need to announce power. He simply had it. He glanced around the room, and his gaze landed on Nira. For a second, everything froze. Not because she recognized him, she didn't, but because her body responded like her heart had known him before her mind did. The man's eyes narrowed slightly, then softened. He gave a small nod, polite and brief. "Good afternoon," he said, taking a seat across from them. "I'm Kellen Dane. I'll be overseeing the partnership process for our board." Kellen. The name settled in her like a strange warmth. Introductions went around the table. Numbers were discussed. Delivery timelines, scaling options, cost projections. Nira spoke when needed, clear and direct, her voice steady like she had practiced in quiet rooms for months. At one point, Kellen looked at her and asked, "You handled the compliance side of this proposal?" "Yes," Nira answered. His expression showed a flicker of approval. "It's solid work." Sarah's eyes darted to Nira, surprised. Praise from someone like Kellen Dane did not come easily. When the meeting ended, handshakes were exchanged. People stood, gathered their folders, and the room began to empty. Nira organized her notes and slid them into her bag. "Ms. Nira," Kellen said. She looked up. "Yes. Can I speak with you for a moment?" he asked, calm as ever. Sarah's brows lifted, but she said nothing. She simply walked out, leaving Nira behind with Kellen and the quiet hum of the air conditioner. Nira stood slowly. "What is it?" Kellen's eyes studied her carefully, like he was reading a story written on her face. "You have a way of listening," he said. "You don't speak to impress. You speak to solve." Nira didn't know what to do with that. "Thank you." He paused, then said, "Have we met before?" "No," she replied quickly, then slower. "I don't think so." He gave a small smile, almost to himself. "That's what I thought. Still, you feel familiar." Nira's throat tightened for reasons she couldn't name. "Maybe you've met someone who looks like me." "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe grief makes strangers feel like echoes." The word grief landed like a soft punch. Nira forced her face to stay neutral. "You lost someone?" Kellen's gaze dropped briefly to the table, then returned. "My fiancé. 3 years ago. Car accident." Nira's breath caught. The same kind of loss. The same cruel randomness. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He nodded once, accepting it without drama. "Thank you." Silence stretched between them, strangely comfortable, like two people sitting near the same fire after surviving different storms. Then Kellen asked, "Would you join me for coffee?" "Not as business. Just as two people." Nira hesitated. Every part of her wanted to say no. Not because he was dangerous, because he wasn't. Because he felt safe in a way that frightened her. Safe meant possibility. Possibility meant risk. And risk had already taken Aaron from her. But something in Kellen's eyes wasn't pushing her, it was offering her space. She swallowed. Coffee is fine. They went to a small cafe on the ground floor of the building. The place was quiet, filled with soft music and the smell of warm pastries. They sat by the window where the city moved like a living river outside. Kellen stirred his coffee slowly. "You don't wear a ring," he said gently, not accusatory. Neera's fingers tightened around her cup. "I used to." His eyes softened with understanding. "You're widowed." Neera nodded once. "My husband died. A year and some months now." Kellen looked down, and for a moment, the sharp businessman disappeared. In his place was just a man. "I'm sorry," he said, voice low. Neera let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. "It changes everything," she murmured. "Even the way you breathe." "I know," he replied. They talked for almost an hour, carefully at first, then more naturally. Neera didn't tell him about Vane. Not yet. But she spoke about how she rebuilt, how she found work, how she learned to stand again. Kellen listened like her words mattered. And when she laughed, just a small laugh at something he said, she startled herself. It was the first time in a long time that laughter didn't feel like betrayal. When they stood to leave, Kellen asked, "Can I see you again?" Neera stared at him, the question cracking something open in her chest. "I don't know," she admitted. "I'm not good at this anymore." Kellen nodded. "Then we don't call it anything. We just talk. When you're ready." And somehow, that made her want to be ready. Over the next weeks, their meetings became small rituals. Coffee after work. A short drive with music low. A walk through a quiet park where children played and life felt normal. Kellen never pressured her. He never tried to rush her heart. One evening, as they sat on a bench under streetlights, Kellen said, "Do you still love him?" Neera's eyes filled instantly. She hated how quickly tears came, like grief lived right under her skin. "Yes," she whispered. "I do." Kellen didn't flinch. He didn't look jealous. He simply nodded, voice gentle. "That's not a problem." Neera turned to him, confused. "It should be." "No," he said, eyes steady. "Love doesn't disappear because someone dies. It just changes shape. And you don't have to destroy one love to make room for another." Neera's breath shook. "How do you know that?" Kellen's jaw tightened briefly. "Because I tried to destroy mine. I tried to hate her memory so it would stop hurting. It didn't work. I only ended up hating myself." Neera stared at him, heart aching in a new way. In that moment, she realized something. Kellen wasn't there to save her. He was there to understand her. And that was its own kind of healing. Then life did what it always did. It tested her. One afternoon, Neera and Sarah were invited to a public business forum. An event where contracts were celebrated, partnerships announced, and investors networked. It was in a luxury hotel ballroom with bright chandeliers and cameras everywhere. Sarah handed Neera a garment bag. "Wear this," she said with a grin. "You've earned it." Inside was a dress, simple, elegant, powerful. Neera stared at it like it didn't belong to her. "Sarah." "Don't argue," Sarah said. "Tonight, you don't hide." Neera went home, got dressed, and stood in front of the mirror. The woman staring back looked expensive. Not in material, but in presence. Her hair was styled neatly. Her makeup was soft but confident. Her eyes still carried pain, but now the pain looked like it had been sharpened into strength. When she entered the ballroom beside Sarah, heads turned. Kellen was there too, dressed in a dark suit, speaking with executives. When his eyes found her, his face shifted, like he forgot the room existed. He walked straight to her. "You look," he stopped, searching for the right word, "like someone who survived a war and came back wearing victory." Neera's throat tightened. "You always talk like that." Kellen smiled. "Only when it's true." He offered his arm. "May I?" Neera hesitated for half a second, then rested her hand on his arm. And that's when she heard the voice she hated most. "Neera." Her body went cold. Slowly, she turned. Vane stood near the entrance, wearing a suit that looked borrowed, his eyes widening as if he had seen a ghost. Beside him was Aunt Mara, lips tight, gaze sharp. They stared at her like they couldn't understand what they were seeing. Not the broken widow they pushed out. Not the quiet woman who packed a suitcase and left. But a woman standing tall in a ballroom, arm linked with a powerful man, looking like she belonged among wealth and respect. Vane took a step forward. "What are you doing here?" Neera felt Kellen's arm tense under her hand. Do you know them? He murmured. Nira swallowed slowly, her voice calm. Yes. Mara's eyes dragged over Nira's dress, her hair, her poise. So you've been pretending to suffer while you were out here doing this? Nira almost laughed at the audacity. Pretending, she repeated softly. Vane leaned in, lowering his voice. Nira, don't create a scene. People are watching. Nira lifted her chin. People watched when you took my home too. You didn't care then. Mara's eyes flashed. That house was family property. Nira's smile was small and dangerous. Is that what you told yourselves to sleep at night? Vane's face hardened. You don't belong here. Kellen's voice cut through smoothly. Actually, she does. Vane's eyes snapped to Kellen. And who are you? Kellen's expression remained calm, but his presence filled the space like a warning. Kellen Dane. Vane's face changed instantly, like recognition hit him. Like he realized he was standing in front of someone with power he couldn't challenge. Mara's voice softened in false sweetness. Oh, Mr. Dane. We didn't know. Kellen didn't acknowledge the charm. He looked at Nira. Do you want to leave? Nira's heart pounded. For a second, she wanted to run. She wanted to escape the way she used to. But then she remembered the suitcase. The keys taken from her palm. The coldness in Vane's eyes. The way they tried to erase her. And she realized this moment was not here to break her. It was here to prove she had changed. Nira shook her head slowly. No, she said. I'm not leaving. Kellen's eyes held hers, pride quiet and steady. Then I'm staying too. Vane swallowed, trying to regain control. Nira, we can talk. Maybe we. No, Nira said, cutting him off with a calmness that scared even her. You don't get to maybe me anymore. Mara hissed under her breath. Ungrateful girl. Nira stepped forward, voice still low, but sharp enough to cut. You took everything after my husband died. You thought that would end me. But you were wrong. Vane's lips parted, but no words came. Nira turned her gaze across the ballroom. People were watching now, curiosity spreading like smoke. Cameras flashing. Whispers rising. She looked back at Vane and Mara and spoke the sentence that had been growing in her heart for months. You will see me again, she said. And next time, you won't recognize the woman you tried to destroy. Then she turned away, hand still on Kellen's arm, and walked into the center of the room like she belonged there. Because she did. And somewhere in the crowd, a new chapter was already opening. One that would force the truth into the light. The night of the business forum did not end quietly for Nira. Long after the music softened and the crowd thinned, whispers about her followed her across the room. People wanted to know who she was, how she had risen so quickly, and why Kellen Dane stood so close to her side. She answered politely when spoken to, smiled when expected, and leaned into the strength she had built for moments exactly like this. But inside, her heart was racing. When they finally stepped out into the cool night air, the city felt louder than usual. Cars hissed past. Neon lights flickered on wet pavement. Kellen stopped beside his car and turned to her. Are you okay? He asked. Nira let out a slow breath. I didn't expect to see them. Not tonight. Not like that. Kellen nodded. You handled it with grace. More than they deserved. She gave a tired smile. Grace is just anger that learned how to speak calmly. Kellen studied her, then said gently, You don't have to carry this alone, you know. Nira's chest tightened. I'm used to it. He didn't argue. He simply opened the car door for her. The small kindness nearly undid her. The days that followed brought storms. An anonymous email landed in Sarah's company inbox, questioning Nira's background, hinting that she was entangled in family disputes and should be carefully reviewed before any major partnership. Sarah showed it to her with a frown. This feels personal, Sarah said. Nira's stomach sank. She knew the tone. She knew the cruelty behind polite words. They're trying to make me look unstable, Nira said quietly. Sarah's eyes hardened. Then we don't let them. The board called a review meeting. Questions were asked. Nira answered with calm clarity. She presented her work, her records, her clean performance history. Nothing in the email could be proven because it was built on shadows and malice. After the meeting, Sarah placed a hand on Nira's shoulder. You're solid. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. That night, Nira sat alone in her room, Aaron's watch resting in her palm. The old ache stirred. I'm tired, she whispered into the quiet. I'm strong, but I'm tired. Her phone buzzed. A message from Kellen. Are you awake? She hesitated, then replied. Yes. Minutes later, he was at her door. No grand gestures. No speeches. Just presence. They sat on opposite ends of the small couch, the silence between them heavy but honest. "They're coming for your reputation," Kellen said softly. "I can shield you from some of it, but I won't fight your battles without your permission." Nira's eyes filled. "Why are you here, Kellen?" He met her gaze. "Because I care about you. And because when I look at you, I see someone who learned to stand in fire and didn't turn to ash." The words broke something open. Nira's shoulders shook. For the first time since Aaron died, she allowed herself to cry in front of someone who wasn't trying to fix her. Kellen didn't rush her. He didn't touch her until she reached for his hand herself. When her fingers curled around his, she felt it, the fear, the pull, the forbidden hope. "I'm scared," she admitted. "If I love you, it feels like I'm betraying him." Kellen's voice was gentle. "Love isn't a betrayal of the past. It's a continuation of your life." Nira closed her eyes. "I don't know how to start again." "You don't have to start," he said. "You just have to keep going. Together, if you choose." She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not a replacement for Aaron, but a different story. A different kind of safety. One that didn't erase her grief, but made room for it. Slowly, she leaned forward and rested her forehead against his. For the first time in a long time, her heart did not feel alone. The confrontation came sooner than expected. A week later, Nira received a call from a law office. Vane and Mara were attempting to finalize the sale of the house she once shared with Aaron. The house she helped build. The house taken from her in the fog of grief. "They're rushing it," the lawyer said. "If you have any claim, now is the time." Nira's hands trembled. Old fear tried to rise. But then she remembered the woman in the mirror. The one who no longer asked for permission to exist. She asked Sarah for time off. She asked Kellen to come with her, not as a shield but as support. The house looked the same from the outside. Fresh paint. New gate. Inside it felt wrong. Like someone had rearranged her memories. Vane was there with Mara and a realtor. When Nira walked in, the room went still. "You again?" Mara snapped. "This is private business." Nira met her gaze calmly. "So was my marriage. You didn't respect that either." Vane scoffed. "You lost your claim when you signed those papers." Nira reached into her bag and placed a file on the table. "I signed under distress. No independent counsel. No fair valuation. And you forged Aaron's consent on the property transfer." Vane's face drained of color. "That's a lie." "It's not," Nira said. "I had the documents reviewed." The realtor shifted uncomfortably. "Is this true?" Mara's eyes darted. "This is a family matter." Kellen spoke for the first time, voice calm but firm. "Then settle it as a family without fraud." Vane's jaw clenched. "You brought a lawyer now?" Nira shook her head. "No. I brought the truth." Silence fell heavy. The realtor slowly closed his folder. "I can't proceed with this sale under these circumstances." Mara's composure cracked. "You ungrateful girl. After everything we did." "You did nothing for me," Nira said quietly. "You took advantage of my grief. And now you're angry that I survived it." Vane stepped forward, anger flaring. "You think you've won because you have a rich man beside you?" Nira's eyes did not waver. "I think I've won because I found my voice." For a moment, it looked like Vane might explode. Then he stepped back, defeated by the weight of evidence and the eyes watching him. Nira turned away from the house. She did not take it back. She let it go. Some things were not meant to be reclaimed. They were meant to be released. In the months that followed, the storm settled. The attempted smear failed. The partnership with Sarah's company flourished. Nira was promoted to a leadership role, her mind finally given room to grow as fiercely as her heart had healed. Kellen remained beside her, not as a savior, but as a companion. They moved slowly. Some days were light. Some days grief returned without warning. On those days, Kellen held her hand and let the silence speak. One evening, they stood on a quiet balcony overlooking the city. The lights below looked like scattered stars. "I used to think my life ended when Aaron died," Nira said softly. "Now I think that chapter ended. But the story didn't." Kellen smiled. "The strongest stories always have the deepest wounds." She turned to him. "I still love him." "I know," Kellen said. "And I love the woman who learned to live with that love." Nira reached for his hand. This time it felt like a choice, not a fear. They had taken everything after her husband died. Her home, her security, her sense of belonging. But they did not take her courage. They did not take her ability to love again. And they did not take the woman she became when she chose to rise instead of disappear. Please like, comment, and subscribe. and tell us where you're watching from. Your support helps these real-life inspired stories reach hearts that are quietly carrying their own pain. And remind someone out there that even after everything is taken from you, you can still return as the woman they feared.